In a world where powers are fighting for control, a bold movement has shaken the world order. France, traditionally an ally of the United States, has crossed a historic threshold by questioning the established order. And this shocked Europe, but also the entire world. But beyond geopolitical interests, what does this moment teach us in the broader context of faith and divine wisdom? Today, we dive into an analysis that crosses political boundaries. We will discover what this action means in light of the spiritual principles of Islam, courage in the face of injustice, and the divine call to independence. Hang in there, because this thought just might change your perception of power, justice, and resilience. 1. The search for independence. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a nation, a people standing up, not out of pride, but out of necessity. France, old, proud, with deep roots in world history, has just whispered what many were thinking. We can no longer be children tied to the hand of the United States. This whisper, which became a declaration, crossed the Atlantic, and even the European Union raised an eyebrow. Because daring to question the American giant is, in the eyes of some, a form of rebellion. But for others, it's a return to oneself, an awakening, a sacred claim, that of sovereignty. And there, without even looking, the heart remembers a hadith. The Prophet Muhammad, one day, saw a confident man, too confident perhaps. He left his camel free, without tying it, claiming that he was doing tawakkul, that he placed his trust in Allah. But the messenger said to him, with this gentle and firm wisdom, tie your camel and then put your trust in Allah. This hadith seems simple, but it contains a world where excessive dependence is a laziness of the soul, a world where true faith requires action, foresight, responsibility. France, in this parable, ties up his camel. She refuses to live in the shadow of Washington, to depend on an American military umbrella, or on economic decisions taken on Wall Street. She wants to stand on her own legs. But is this independence a rejection or a reaffirmation? Is it a break or an awakening? Allah says in the Quran, and put your trust in Allah. Allah loves those who put their trust in Him. Surah Al-Imran, verse 159. But besides this verse, there are so many others which order prepare, of to plan, of get ready. In the divine scale, there is no true faith without movement, no confidence without effort, no independence without responsibility. And this quest for national freedom, this need to cut the invisible cord, joins a more intimate need that everyone feels. Because deep down, you too have already wanted to free yourself. Maybe from the opinions of others, maybe from a toxic job, perhaps from a system that exhausts you, that steals your energy, your peace, your faith. And you wanted to move away, to extract yourself, to become master of your destiny, while keeping Allah as your guide. But here is the difficulty. How to find this right balance? What France is doing today on the geopolitical scene, each of us must do, on our own scale, in our own lives. This is not about rejecting help. This is not about arrogance. It's about dignity. Remember, even the Prophet, even the most beloved of Allah, carefully prepared each expedition. Before the Battle of Badr, he consulted his companions. He drew up a plan, evaluated the forces, organized the ranks, and then he turned to Allah, weeping and invoking with intensity. Independence is not born in improvisation. She's born in a spiritual responsibility, a heart turned towards the sky but feet firmly anchored on the earth. And the question I ask you now, to you who are listening to me, how can you also tie up your camel in your life? How can you make courageous decisions without forgetting Allah in the equation? Have you entrusted your livelihood to a boss? Your happiness to a person? Your security to a government? Maybe it's time to return to the one who never betrays. To take a step forward with faith. To cut the bonds of excessive dependence. To rediscover the bonds of noble and voluntary servitude towards your Creator. France is making this choice today. And while it's political, it's also symbolic. A nation dares to free itself. And you? What are you waiting for to do it? 2. European solidarity put to the test. Imagine a large, round table. Around, nations with serious faces. France speaks with a firm voice. Germany listens in silence. Italy raises a doubtful eyebrow. There are disagreements, murmurs, silences that weigh heavier than words. France, in love with sovereignty, is asking for a seemingly simple thing. Let's walk together, united, strong, equals. But union, in this world of intersecting interests, is a more difficult ambition than it seems. European countries, supposed to be members of the same political body, reveal a truth that many prefer to keep quiet. The fractures are there. Italy doubts. Germany hesitates. Poland looks elsewhere. Everyone thinks about their interests, their contracts, their hidden alliances with the United States. And suddenly, this political theater becomes a mirror of we, of our community, of our ummah. Because in this scene of troubled diplomacy, we find an immense lesson from our Prophet. He said, believers, in their mutual love, mercy and compassion, are as one body. If one member suffers, the whole body reacts with sleeplessness and fever. Sahih al-Bukhari. But what to do when the body seems dissociated? When one suffers, but the other looks away? When the call for unity collides with the cold wall of pride or self-interest? This divide in the European Union is what we are also experiencing in our own ranks, in our families, in our communities, in our ummah. Internal divisions, easy judgments, closed hearts, arguing over details while the world burns around us. There is something painfully familiar about this European scene, because we too know what it is like to have members of the same body who refuse to cooperate. Hearts that are silent when they should beat in unison. And yet, this is not the first time that the Prophet saw his community divided. During the Battle of Uhud, some companions disobeyed. Unity has been broken. The consequence was painful. But the Prophet did not give up. He gathered. He taught. He healed wounded hearts. He showed that the true unity is not born from uniformity, but mercy. And if Europe wants to move forward together, it will have to learn what the Prophet taught more than 6,400 years ago. Love and compassion are not weaknesses. They are pillars. Without them, there is no fraternity. Without fraternity, there is no sustainable strategy. France calls for unity. But behind this political voice hides a universal spiritual aspiration. Walk together. Speak with one voice. Think not moi, more we. And you who listen to these words, look around you. Is your family united? Is your community united? Is your heart capable of moving for the pain of your brother or sister? The question is asked, how can we overcome our differences to face common challenges? It is not enough to talk about unity. We must forgive. You have to listen. Sometimes you have to give up your own comfort for the good of the group. European leaders must learn to speak with humility. And we, in our homes, in our mosques, in our hearts, must learn to love, even when we disagree. Unity is not a naive dream. It is a divine command. And hold fast together to the cable of Allah and do not be divided. Surah Al-Imran 103. This cable is still there. But do we all have our hands stretched out to Him? Or are we too busy pulling our own weight? 3. The economic and moral consequences. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a shopping street in France, once lively, now silent. The windows are empty. The lights are turned off earlier. Stores are closing one after the other. A baker lowers his iron curtain with a heavy heart. A family hesitates to fill their cart, calculating each euro carefully. All this because of an economic war unleashed on the other side of the ocean. A decision taken in Washington which resonates in the silent corridors of an SME in Bordeaux. Globalized capitalism has its laws, but rarely his hearts. The new taxes imposed by the United States are hitting, and they hit hard. It's not just a matter of numbers. It's not just GDP, indices, or quarterly reports. It is a human reality, lives turned upside down, jobs lost, abandoned dreams. And in this storm, a question arises. What remains of our values? France, Europe, are being put to the test. Not only economically, but morally. Will they agree to sacrifice justice in the name of opportunism? Will they turn a blind eye to the most vulnerable to save big companies? Or in this crisis, will they rediscover what makes the nobility of a nation? Solidarity, compassion, equity. It is in difficult times that the soul of a people is revealed. Islam has always taught us this. When Medina was going through a famine, the Prophet Muhammad did not organize an emergency summit or decree a multi-million plan. He simply gathered hearts. He said to the rich, "Give, share, support, because your wealth is only worth what it can save." And they gave. They opened their homes. They filled their neighbors' bowls. They transformed poverty into fraternity. It wasn't charity. It was spiritual justice. Today, France is at a crossroads. Will it implement economic policies that protect the most vulnerable? Or will it give in to the cold logic of the markets? Will it listen to the voice of the oppressed or that of shareholders? And we, you and me, are we different? How many times have we looked away from the brother in need? How many times have we closed the door to our heart because of the fear of losing a little of our comfort? This world is going through a test, but the test is a mirror. It sends us back to ourselves. And Allah says in the Quran, you will only achieve godliness when you spend on what you love. Surah Al-Imran, verse 92. What we love is our security, our comfort, our stability. But sometimes these things must be shared for justice to exist. Look around you. The neighbor who no longer has a job, the single mother who no longer dares to open her bills, the trader who fights not to lay off workers. And ask yourself, am I listening or am I still asleep? Because it is not just an economic crisis. It's a moral crisis. And those who survive will not necessarily be the richest, but the fairest. Those who knew how to reach out at the right time. Those who know how to say no to indifference. Those who, as in the time of Medina, will have understood that to give is not to lose. but it is live, your humanity fully. So I ask you the question again. How can we, individually and collectively, support those who are economically vulnerable during these uncertain times? And if the answer didn't come from a government plan, but from your heart? 4. Response to international challenges. There comes a time in the history of nations when silence becomes complicity, where prudence turns into submission, and where waiting is no longer a strategy, but an abdication. This moment, France seems to have recognized it. In a daring about-face, she urges her businesses to curb investments in the United States, not out of hostility, but out of assertion of its sovereignty. A disturbing act. An act that surprises even its closest allies within the European Union. An act that even Trump didn't see coming. But behind this political gesture lies something much deeper. A spiritual lesson. A resonance with the fundamental virtues of Islam. Patience, C, constancy, U, and dignity, hanging. Because in international relations, as in our lives, there are times when we must stand up, not to hit, but for no longer bend. In ancient times, when Muslims were still weak in Mecca, they had neither army nor territory, no political protection, but they had Allah. And they had unwavering inner strength, patience in the face of injustice, without ever betraying their principles. Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him, under the burning blows of the whip, repeated a single word, Ahad, Ahad, the One, the One. Not a cry of pain, but one song of loyalty. An absolute refusal to give in. A message sent to the world, you can strike my body, but you will not extinguish the light of my conviction. Today, faced with American pressure, it is this same voice that we believe we hear in France's posture. We will not betray our interests. We will not sacrifice our autonomy on the altar of economic comfort. We will not submit to a logic that disregards justice. And yet, the world is screaming. Markets are threatening. The allies doubt. Analysts criticize. But Allah says in the Quran, O you who believe, be patient, be steadfast, and fear Allah that you may succeed. Surah Al-Imran, verse 200. Because true victory is not in the moment. It is forged in endurance, in the clarity of intentions, and in loyalty to principles even when they cost dearly. France, perhaps without knowing it, embodies here one of the most beautiful wisdoms of Islam, perseverance without compromise. But you, brother, you, sister, what do you do in the face of world pressures? Are you giving in for a contract? Are you giving up your values for an opportunity? Are you silent about your faith for fear of rejection? In a world that wants to bend you, are you one of those who stand up? The Prophet said, know that victory comes with patience, success comes with endurance, and with difficulty comes ease. Today, international relations are only an amplified reflection of our own internal struggles. States seek a balance between principles and interests. And us too. But Islam teaches us that the nobility is not measured by profits. It is measured by righteousness when everything pushes you to deviate. So faced with this tension between the United States and France, between the economy and conscience, the real question is not, who will have the last word? More, who will remain true to their principles, even when the world opposes them? And you? How can you stand firm in your principles while navigating the complexities of your own world? Perhaps by answering this question, you will discover that geopolitics is also a spiritual school, and that behind every international decision, there is a mirror held up to your soul. What happens between nations is never more than a reflection of what happens in our own lives. Faced with challenges, external pressures, and injustices, there is a way, the way of patience, of firmness in faith, and constancy in our principles. France, today, shows us the example of this struggle for independence, for fairness. But what is your commitment to the challenges of life? Do you know how to show patience and dignity when everything seems to be going against you? Always remember that in times of tension, it is your ability to remain true to your principles, while believing in divine justice that shapes your true power, whether for a nation or for yourself. True freedom comes with faith. Thanks for being with us today. May the peace and wisdom of God accompany your every step.